Our first question for tonight goes like this. Can Ajahn talk on Luang Por Plien and his connection to the monastery?
Oh, another big subject. I just talked about Luang Por Wen, who was actually one of the teachers of Luang Por Plien. Luang Por Plien was another great forest monk who passed away, can't remember how many years ago, probably not as many as 10, maybe. Nobody can remember. Anyway, not that many years ago he passed away, but he used to visit Australia and New Zealand regularly for many years. He originally was from northeast Thailand, like so many of the meditation masters. He's from Sakonnakhon province. But he spent a lot of time in northern Thailand, in Chiang Mai region. Some of his teachers, Luang Por Wen, who we've just been talking about, another one, Luang Por Du, another of his teachers. But he also spent time with Luang Por Khao. Many of these teachers you may have read about. Most of them have biographies, some more well translated biographies. So he studied with many of the famous disciples of Ajahn Mun. And I got to know him when I lived in Thailand. Sometimes used to visit him because I've always, since I was a young monk, gone to visit different teachers, either going with other teachers, such as when I lived with Luang Por Anan or Ajahn Piak. Some of the teachers I've lived with would take me to see some of the great Ajahns in Thailand. Or sometimes I just go myself. Later on, when I was more experienced, when I could speak Thai and when I was more senior, I would go myself or with other monks, other friends, and we go and visit teachers, sometimes stay with them, just to spend time to learn, be with them, learn from them. So Luang Por Plien is one of those teachers, and he was always well known for his ability with samadhi, ability to develop deep states of jhana, well known for his psychic powers, well known for his insight and his progress in the noble path. So he always had a very good reputation. And so when I moved to Australia in 2001, he was already visiting Australia quite regularly, so we invited him to come to the monastery from the beginning, the very first year that we lived here. And we were fortunate that he would accept our invitation and come and stay in the monastery. And because he was very wise, compassionate monk, he'd often give very useful teachings, either to individuals about their particular problems and kilesas that they were facing in their meditation practice. He'd give them good advice. And also he'd give advice about the monastery, because we were just starting building our monastery then. We hadn't actually built anything. We just had a piece of forest. And the very first time he came to stay here, he very kindly walked around the forest with us, looking at the possibilities of where we might build different kutis, the huts for the monks, and meditation hall and things like that. He had plenty of good advice about things. And I remember, there's a well-known story the monks here know about. There was one spot on the hill up in the forest. We were walking through the forest. We took him to that spot. And we said, "Oh, Luang Por, we're thinking of building a kuti here, a meditation hut on this spot. What do you think? Is it a good spot?" And he sat down to meditate for a while. And then afterwards he said, "Yeah, this is a good spot. Yes, you should build the kuti here, and one day somebody's going to get enlightened here." So many monks have gone to spend time in that kuti. I'm not sure if anyone's got enlightened yet, but we're always hopeful. So Luang Por was always a very kind and compassionate teacher. He'd give many hours of his time to teaching both the Sangha, say when he stayed with us, giving teaching to the Sangha, and then also to the laity. And all the times I've known him, whether he was in his monastery in Thailand or he was traveling in Australia here, he was somebody who, like his teacher, Luang Por Wen, he just didn't sleep very much. And it's quite normal for him to stay up until 1 a.m., 2 a.m., have a few hours rest and then be up again. At dawn, maybe at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., be up again. He certainly practiced like that all the time that he stayed with us in Australia. He hardly slept at all. He'd be giving all his time for other people, teaching the Dhamma, leading them in chanting, meditation, but also teaching, giving talks and good advice to people. And the same, and not just here, but every monastery he stayed in, and he would travel around the world, went to many different countries, till eventually he was so weak the doctors wouldn't let him travel anymore. And then he would continue teaching in his own monastery in Chiang Mai, and more and more people would go to see him. Ajahn Sutam, who came here today, was saying when he first went to stay with Luang Por Plien in Chiang Mai, where he lived, there were just 4 monks, a very small Sangha, and just 1 or 2 people would come to visit, and there was very little food. It was a very small, quiet, simple monastery in the early days. But over his lifetime, because he was such a compassionate, wise teacher, more and more monks went to live with him or ordain with him, and more lay people went to visit him. And so his monastery grew, his reputation grew, and he became a very loved and respected meditation master by the end of his life. So there's probably a lot more I could say about him, but needless to say, he was a very wise and peaceful monk, and we're very grateful that he used to visit us here. And many people all around Thailand were very grateful that he, for his life and for his teachings.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. In my society, people have very little awareness in their behaviors and wrong speech. Even though I know it's other people's karma when they speak in a nasty way, I still feel hurt and upset and unable to wish those types of people well. Is there a way for me to be less affected by their hostile and mean speech?
Well, yes, this is a problem I think most people face. We have to perhaps develop more of what we call the Brahma Vihara Dhammas, the 4 qualities that help us to live peacefully and successfully in society, even though everyone does have their wrong views, wrong behaviors. We're sort of surrounded by it. The Brahma Viharas are something that Luang Por Plien would emphasize a lot. Metta, basic attitude of goodwill. Karuna, compassion. Mudita, sympathetic joy. Upekkha, equanimity. So these 4 qualities arise out of each other. They're so linked, they're not really separate, but sometimes we need to develop one more than the other, perhaps. But when you're living with other people and they display their wrong behavior, harmful behavior, sometimes if it's directed towards us, we need a lot of upekkha, a lot of equanimity, because it's coming our way, and maybe the tendency is to fall into anger. So we need to be very patient, equanimous as much as possible, and that comes from mindfulness, and then sort of resilience of mind. But then also we need to cultivate compassion. Because if somebody is behaving in a harmful way, like I mentioned, probably your first reaction is to get annoyed, angry with them. But really, we have to pause and say, well, this person is, if they are acting or speaking in an unskillful way, they're harming themselves. They're causing themselves suffering. And even though you might say, oh, it's tempting to get angry or annoyed, really, they're worthy of compassion because they're causing themselves harm. Until they change their ways, they're going to be making karma that will come back on them over and over again. And your dislike of what they're doing and your reaction is part of the karma, and that may be multiplied by many people. Maybe other people around them are similar, fed up with their bad behavior or whatever. But then we also have to, having developed some compassion for those people, we have to come back to ourselves, don't we? And say, well, do I do that? And sometimes we learn from other people's behavior to see ourselves. And we have to be honest here and come back and say, well, do I ever say these kind of things or speak in these ways or act in these ways? Because I think all of us, until we're well established on the noble path, we're all going to have mental defilements affecting us. And if you can see them in other people, you can probably find them in yourself. And where can you really change things is in yourself. Those other people have to learn to change themselves. It's unlikely you're going to be able to do much for them. You can wish them to change and improve, but they're going to have to learn that for themselves. You're going to have to learn for yourself. So my encouragement is when you see other people behaving inappropriately, harmfully, badly, come back to yourself and say, can I do this? Is this in me as well? Where do I speak in a harmful way? Where do I act unskillfully in my life? And start correcting that where you see it, where you find it. So you have to look back at yourself. And as you're doing that, and if you do notice your own bad habits, your own unskillful habits, you become less angry with other people again because you realize, well, I do it as well. I can't get angry with them. That's hypocritical, isn't it? So it's not that you become blind to your faults, their faults, but you don't get so angry with other people because you realize this is the human condition. We have mental defilements. We have to learn how to deal with them skillfully. And your first duty maybe is just deal with your own mental defilements and the way they come out in your speech, your actions. No one else is going to do it for you. So just as other people have to learn and practice for themselves, you have to learn and practice for yourself as well. Who else is going to do it? The Buddha said, I can't do it for you. That's not the role of the Buddha. His role is to teach and set a good example. And that's the same for all, the ordained Sangha. In the end, we as individuals have to practice for ourselves. So we have to come back and observe our own body, speech and mind and cultivate the path there.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next we have a raised hand, so I will invite our participant to unmute.
Hello, Lumpur.
Good evening. Can't hear. What happened?
Not sure. Hi. But,
now we can hear.
And it remuted. So nice to see you. Calling in from the UK. And just as you talked about, choosing one's own path and the chanda and all that, and developing one's own heart and mind, and trying to do that the best I can. But I also work with other people, and there's a project that I've got two other people to work with, and they don't know anything about Buddhism, or no, not so much, let alone Thai forest Buddhism. And it's just, and they do keep kind of sila, they live well, and they don't lie, and they're honest and all that. But sometimes it can be a bit, I don't know, I sometimes want to bring in sort of my Buddhist practice into our work, or talk about it a bit, hear about what they are interested, etc. So I guess I know Buddha talked about wise friends, but what any sort of guidance around working with people that aren't, you know, Buddhist or don't follow this tradition. For example, one thing that's on my mind is one of my collaborators. I offered to bring them some lunch, and they said no, they didn't want it. And then when I showed up without it, it's like, why don't you bring it? Why don't you, so how rude are you? Blah blah blah. I'm like, God. So anyway, people are funny old things, Lumpur, and any advice on that would be welcome.
Yeah, dana with people is sometimes tricky. Perhaps you just have to say something like, if you ever are ready to receive my lunch, I'm willing to bring some for you, but you can't force it on people, can you?
Yeah.
Everyone has their own taste, their own ways of doing things. So that's perhaps part of the practice, is to be tolerant of people and their ways. And that's a very Buddhist thing, isn't it? To consciously practice tolerance. But I would just try to be the best example that you can in what you're doing, in the work you're doing, and how you relate to other people. And the Buddha said, if you're cultivating the qualities of a Kalyana Mitta, like you say, a wise friend, a good friend, the Kalyana Mitta never leads their friends into unskillful, harmful action. You're always encouraging them in the skillful way. If they have a problem or there's some choice they're making and they're talking to you about it, you always try to encourage them to do something in a good way that is going to be for their benefit, the benefit of others. How that applies in daily life, just depends on who the people are, what the situation is. But it's a way for you to reflect on the way you're encouraging people, the kind of advice you give, the way you're communicating with them. Could you be more skillful? Is there more you can do to help them? It doesn't have to be using Buddhist terminology, but you're just trying to encourage them to develop skillful qualities such as tolerance, kindness, patience, mindfulness, in whatever way you can, and to steer them away from anything that you're sure is going to be harmful to them. If there's a choice, shall we go to the meditation retreat or shall we go and get drunk? Go to the meditation retreat is a better choice, isn't it? It's a very obvious one, but you're just trying to steer people in the ways of, perhaps a more common one might be, perhaps someone you work with is getting really angry or annoyed with another colleague or another person, and they're tempted to take it out on them, get back at them, seek revenge on them in some way or other. Maybe trying to help them just to see the value of being patient with it, maybe forgiving or letting go, moving on, not to seek revenge, not to take it out on the person even though they may have annoyed you or whatever. Trying to encourage them in these ways, because often in society nobody's saying that, is it? Often you're not being encouraged to forgive, let go, move on. You often are being supported in your desire to get someone or seek revenge on someone. Often that's the words, the comments you get from other people. So if you can introduce any kind of wise, compassionate response to just ordinary events in daily life, I think that's really helpful in the workplace. And just try to be kind in the way you talk and relate to people, not to take advantage of them, not to, if you're feeling very tired, angry, upset, well, not to take it out on others. Try to be as patient as you can with your own emotions. All these sort of things over time, people often start to notice and appreciate it in you. They may even get to the point, I know one lady who practices Buddhism in her workplace, and she has a job where she's in a position of responsibility, and she obviously makes a point of not giving in to her anger. She gets angry, of course, with the behavior of other people around her, but not to give in to it and to take it out on others. So she's built a reputation as one who doesn't use harmful speech, aggressive speech, one who is patient, one is tolerant. And she's even had people come up to her and say, how can you do that? What's your secret weapon, or what, you know, where did you learn this? And she said, well, I practice Buddhism, and it can be an entry into talking about Buddhist principles, Buddhist ideas, because people are seeing it in practice. But that may take time. You know, it's not going to happen in one day, but maybe over a period of many months, even years. People get to know you, and sometimes they can be quietly impressed with something that they notice in you that maybe they don't see in other parts of society, and they'll want to know why. And that leads you on to maybe explain about Buddhism a bit more. I'm just speaking generally, but you know, I think that's how we practice Buddhism in daily life. We don't have to give lectures or talk about even Buddhist terms, but just putting it into practice in simple ways to the point where people notice it and hopefully appreciate it.
Thank you, Lumpur. And if I have a tendency to, and it's about me, try to take responsibility for other people. So if they are behaving unskillfully, whatever, how can one sort of realize, keep the boundary, I guess. So of course, be a guide and all that. And actually, that's really helpful what you just said about being an example. But it can be an example at one point, and then it can be kind of like, oh, well, you know, they're not seeing it, or etc. So one's own stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You always have to reflect on who the person is and what your relationship is to them, because sometimes, you know, like you wish somebody well, and or you take responsibility. Maybe you can see something that they need to do differently or improve on, but even if you go and tell them, they're not going to listen because they don't see you as the person to tell them. You know, I don't know your specific situation, but it's very common. This happens all the time. You're limited by your relationship to that person, or you haven't developed your relationship with that person to the point where you can tell them some things. So you have to be very patient and sometimes just go very gently, slowly, because, you know, you might say something that's true, but they don't accept it because they don't see you as their mentor, or you're not the one who's going to tell them. So they'll just react, even though it's true. They might react badly. So these things take time. You have to cultivate the right atmosphere, the right qualities, so that then you can maybe talk about things that are more intimate or more personal to that person. It's hard enough talking to, you know, people we live with, like family, let alone people we work with who we spend less time with, you know, even harder.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Sadhu. We have another live question.
Hello, Ajahn. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening. My question is sort of related to the past question. I've heard some Ajahns mention that we should be Kalyanamitas to ourselves, and that sounds really good, no? But I wonder, what does exactly being a Kalyanamita to oneself look like, no? Because I'm thinking that a Kalyanamita is like a guide, someone who is a good guide for your practice. But if we still have many kilesas and they are actually the ones making many of our decisions, how can we will still have dust in our eyes, be our own Kalayanamitas?
Well, don't let your kilesas be the one who make the decisions in your mind. That's the whole point. Like, there's the Kalyanamitta on the outside, the more sort of traditional way of talking about who you associate with, try to find good friends and be a good friend to the people around you. But also on the inside, internally, who are you associating with in your mind? Meaning, do you spend a lot of time with these mental defilements? Do you allow them to make the decisions to run your life? You know, your greed, your anger, your jealousy, your worries and fears. Are you spending time with them? Meaning, are they becoming your fake Kalyanamittas in your mind, determining your behavior and probably causing you all kinds of suffering? Or are you saying, no, I don't want to associate with my worry, my anger, my jealousy. I want to associate with the good qualities that I've learned from Buddhism. So I want to consciously bring them up, turn to them more, and start to ignore or let go of the more negative qualities of mine. So, you got the good and the bad in your mind, not just out there in the world, but in your own mind. And, probably anger is the most obvious one here. Quite often we are happy enough or willing enough to sit with our angry thoughts. When we're angry with someone, we're not saying, oh, come on, forgive, let go, don't stay with these thoughts. Sometimes we're just saying, yes, I hate them, and you just keep thinking those thoughts, and you're happy enough to think those thoughts. So that's like associating with the unwise, the bad friend. You're making friends with the wrong way of thinking, the wrong intention, the wrong mental behavior, where we should be saying, no, I'm not going to make friends with you today. I'm going to let you go. You go on your way. I'm going to cultivate kindness, forgiveness, compassion, whatever is needed in the situation. That's your Kalyana Mitta. That's the good friend that you need to bring into your mind. So you can look at it in that way. How are you spending your time mentally? And you'll notice this from meditation, won't you? If you meditate for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, what's been going on? At the end of your meditation, review what were you thinking about, what was going on in your mind. And sometimes you're just battling with tiredness or sleepiness maybe. Sometimes you're peaceful, sometimes you have a big issue that's affecting you. And you're spending your whole half an hour planning how to destroy your rival or get back at someone who's annoyed you. We have to be honest and say, this is not the way to go. So you also have to learn how to talk to yourself, and you maybe learn that partly in meditation and just in daily life. What kind of conversations you're having with yourself. Maybe there's no one else around to talk to. So what advice are you giving yourself? Are you saying, I can't stand it anymore? You're about to make some really foolish decision because you're really stressed. Or are you telling yourself, oh, relax, calm down, wait, pause, don't rush into things? Again, I'm just giving an example. But how do you talk to yourself through your day, the kind of mental conversations you have with yourself? That's also part of being a Kalyana Mitta to yourself. It's something you have to train in and develop for yourself. The way you train your mind to, you might call it wise reflection. This word we use, the yoniso manasikara, which is how you talk to yourself, how you look at things, the attitude you're developing. In the end, that's your responsibility. No one else is going to do that for you because it's your own personal mental activity. So we have to take an interest in it, and sometimes you have to be strong and say, stop thinking like that, stop planning that, that's not helpful. Stop talking to yourself like that, that's not going to bring anything good maybe. And other times you have to encourage the good things and say, look, just keep on this track, be patient, be kind, bring up the mindfulness, whatever's needed. We have to give ourselves the right instructions at different times.
Okay, good. Many thanks. That's very clear.
Sadhu. Okay, and next question. Can Ajahn give a thorough definition of what bhavana is, besides the definition of practicing meditation?
Right, well, we use this word meditation just because it's easy to have a word, but bhavana is the Buddhist word, the Pali word, and it literally means to bring into existence, to cultivate or bring into existence. So a little bit like you have a garden, you plant a seed, you water it, you nurture it, and the seed becomes a flower or a tree or something. It's bringing into existence from something that obviously wasn't there before. So what are you bringing into existence? What are you cultivating? Well, the qualities of bhavana, they have different aspects. One way of describing it is samatha bhavana and vipassana bhavana. So vipassana is something many people have heard about. They've done retreats and heard about. That's more the wisdom side of the mind, the ability to clearly see the way things are. So particularly with the characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. These three universal characteristics. So bhavana would mean directing your mind to observe, investigate, come to a point where you clearly see, clearly know these three characteristics in whatever is arising in your experience. The other kind of bhavana, samatha bhavana, is learning to one-point the mind, to overcome mental distraction, the hindrances, bring the mind to a state of calm, stillness, one-pointedness, which will facilitate and support the vipassana. So that's probably the most common way bhavana is used, developing stillness, samadhi, and developing insight, where there was no insight before, where there was no stillness before. So you're bringing it out, cultivating it, bringing it into existence. However, there's other ways that they expand the meaning of bhavana. So you can expand it to say something like Gaya bhavana, the way you cultivate your physical actions to support the samatha and vipassana. So that would include sila, the way you talk, what you talk about, your intentions, whether they're wholesome or not, cultivating wholesome intentions in the way you speak, the way you act. Also cultivating a wise relationship with the world around you. So not just people, but also the physical world, the environment, the place you live, place you work, the society, the environment around you, and so on. So bhavana can be expanded out into different aspects of our life or our practice. But in essence, it's these two qualities, samatha bhavana, vipassana bhavana.
Saralumpu. Another question. Reading about death contemplation and practicing dana, especially towards the Bhikkhu Sangha, inspires me much more than working and associating with my dislikable supervisor at work. I have been practicing for over a decade, and if Ajahn knows a way that can boost up the speed of me quitting my job and moving to stay in the monastery long term. For now, it's my 86-year-old father stopping me from doing this, and being a daughter in an Asian family, I cannot disobey him.
Well, although living with parents can be challenging because they often have a totally different character to us, different generation, different views, the sort of simple truth that our parents, generally speaking, are the ones who bring us into the world, give birth to us, raise us, is such a powerful force for good in our life that even if we don't agree with our parents, don't particularly like them or get on with them, it's still a very good kind of karma to look after them, give something back to them. So if you're working, then that may be mainly on the material side of things, trying to help arrange for their health care, their day-to-day care, to be comfortable, to be safe, to be as well looked after as you can. But then there's also the Dhamma side of it, to help in whatever way you can in their spiritual or Dhamma development. If they're not Buddhist, well, okay, that's already a bit of an obstacle there, but getting them to hear or read or hear Dhamma in any form is always going to be good, in whatever way you can. So for whatever you've learned in your Dhamma practice, whatever you can feed back or support them in their practice is a great thing. So these two things, the physical side and the mental side, or the Dhamma side. Whatever you can give back to your parents is a very good thing, and you learn a lot doing that. Especially if you don't get on with your parents, you're going to have to learn a lot about yourself and letting go of your own opinions and your own preferences. But try and see it is a very important thing to give something back in whatever way you can to your parents. As far as coming to live in a monastery, well, yeah, it's something to aspire to, isn't it? Keep looking at what will be the good causes and conditions for you to come and live in a monastery. I would say number one, keeping the precepts, 5 precepts, and maybe from time to time the 8 precepts. Number 2, practicing meditation every day, shorter or longer periods, whatever you can do. 3, listening to Dhamma regularly, respecting the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma. 4, like you say, practicing dana where you can. So whatever bits of whatever additional material wealth or income you have that you don't really need because it's excess, additional, well, maybe sharing that. Supporting Sangha, supporting good projects in society. So get all of that established. Then your mind is moving towards the monastic life. As far as when the right time will be, not sure there'll ever be a perfect time, but you have to weigh up some of your responsibilities, such as elderly parents, your own health and well-being, your own situation. You just think when you might be able to do it, when the most appropriate time will be. Of course, it's much easier when you're younger. Some people, they realize that, and so they head off to the monastery before they get married, before they get into the career path of their choice and whatever. But if you're later in life, or you maybe have to think about it more and plan it more, but keep the goal in mind, and then you work towards that goal. Keep moving your life towards that goal in whatever way you can. And how quickly or slowly it will be, I can't say because I don't know the details of your life, but I know many people who have gone to the monastery when they've been 40 years old or 50 years old or even 60 years old. But it does get harder the older you get, so try not to leave it too long.
Not being caught into liking or disliking, how can we do this?
The simple answer is mindfulness. When you're mindful, you know something, but you're not following the like. You say something pleasant arises into your experience. You see something attractive, pleasant, or you see something that you find unpleasant, unattractive, but not getting caught into or tempted to follow the craving that might be stimulated by that seeing. So just seeing. Seeing is just seeing. Oh, that's pleasant, attractive. That's unattractive, unpleasant, but not getting lost in that. Keeping your mind present in the moment with mindfulness. There's some wisdom there as well. There's not just mindfulness, there's also sampajanya, which means all-round or knowing or clear comprehension, and maybe also wisdom, knowing whatever you're experiencing, what the characteristics of that object as impermanent, maybe as unattractive, as suffering, as not self. So there's a number of qualities arising together that keep your mind in the middle, and you don't rush after the pleasant, the attractive, and you don't rush after and react to the unattractive. You know these things, but you don't get lost in them. So it's practice of mindfulness, and this is why practicing a lot of mindfulness meditation will give you that steadiness of mind, the calm, so that you can reflect on what you're experiencing, whether it's just a memory and a some train of thought coming up, or it's something external coming your way through your senses. What did the Buddha say? He said, in the seeing, there's just seeing. There's just the knowing of a visual object, maybe knowing its attractive qualities, knowing its unattractive qualities, but not getting lost in them, not reacting with pleasure, attraction or aversion, but just knowing. So like an arahant, someone who's attained nibbana, they still eat food and they might know food as tasty or not very tasty, or bland, or ordinary, or very refined, whatever. They know the characteristics, but they're not getting lost and not reacting with liking and disliking. They just know, oh, it's like that. They know their sense, they have sense contact and the different sense objects coming their way, but they don't get lost in the attractive or unattractive qualities because they're mindful.
Sara Lumpur. Next question. Hi Lumpur. I've noticed that I sometimes find it very difficult not to lie, especially when telling the truth might lead to disagreement or conflict. However, I often feel very guilty afterward. May I ask if you have any advice or guidance on this? Thank you, Lumpur.
Well, just as a general observation, we tend to break precepts because of convenience, or that it's the easiest, apparently easiest solution, easiest way to deal with a certain problem that's arisen. So one thing is to get into the habit of reflecting regularly on your precepts and why you want to keep them. So in the case of lying, where you want to train your mind not to get caught into deluding yourself or other people by false speech, saying things that are not true or exaggerating the truth. You're cultivating a love of truth, a respect for the truth, because that's going to help you in clearing out mental defilements from your mind. Because one of the reasons mental defilements hang around is because we hide them, we lie about them, we're not clear, we're still deluded. So there's love of truth, and training in becoming clear in the truth is a big part of our practice. However, as I said, we tend to lie because it's often just the easiest solution. So you have to also just train yourself to pause and say, hold on, is there a different way I can deal with this? I mean, you have this one maybe quite good intention. You don't want to promote conflict between people, disagreements. That's coming from compassion, I would imagine. But you also have to, how can you achieve that without lying? That's the problem you set up for yourselves. You have to kind of question yourself before you rush in to tell a lie. You say, is there any other way I can do this? And maybe there is, you just haven't thought of it, or you just need to pause a bit, think it through. Maybe sometimes you just have to say, stay quiet. Maybe sometimes your determination to not tell a lie may have to take preference over your desire not to have people misunderstand each other or disagree with each other. There may be almost like a hierarchy of choices, and you say, I don't want to lie, so I'm going to stick to that, even though if I say something, it may be painful for the listener, perhaps. But you've also got other choices, perhaps. Maybe I don't need to say anything. I'll just wait and keep quiet, or somehow avoid having to tell a lie. That's the problem you set up for yourself, and then you have to think it through. How can I deal with this problem, but without breaking a precept? It's the same with so many things, isn't it? It could be killing a fly that's annoying you. The first reaction is usually kill it, squash it, but maybe you can just wait, or there's some other way to deal with it. Breaking the precepts tends to be like that. It forces you to think things through more thoroughly and look for other solutions to desires that come up, problems that arise. And there'll probably be a better solution than just telling a lie in whatever the situation is. So you have to find that.
Sadhu. Next question. Ajahn, could you please give some advice on how to meditate on the 5 aggregates?
5 aggregates are really just body and mind. It's the way the Buddha described a human being. So, number 1, being mindful. As you become mindful, you're bringing your attention to your body and mind, or your 5 aggregates. Being mindful in the present moment. But to be mindful, to pay attention, you train yourself using one single object first, which is still part of the 5 aggregates. So mindfulness of breathing is part of the 5 aggregates. The breath, the breathing mechanism is part of the rupa khandha, the aggregate of form, the physical body, the physical form. But then the quality of mindfulness is a sankhara khandha. So I mean, sometimes it helps to study a bit of the pariyatti, the suttas, and the commentaries, get some understanding of the different Buddhist terms. That will help. And then as you practice mindfulness meditation, say on the breath, well, you can see how the 5 khandhas are all being influenced by your practice of mindfulness, and also are they displaying themselves. So, thoughts arise, feelings coming and going. You start to notice, maybe just in a more vague way at first, common themes, common characteristics of your 5 khandhas is that they change, they arise, pass away. They're constantly in a sort of state of flux, you might say. Sometimes that's very obvious, sometimes it's more subtle. That's one way to approach the khandhas at first, is just ask them, how solid, how long-lasting, how permanent are these khandhas? And it may at first just be an intellectual exercise, thinking it through, asking questions. But as your mindfulness improves and your ability just to observe from a place of stillness, quietness, as that improves, you may notice quite clearly, painful feelings, pleasant feelings, they arise, they cease, they don't last. And some of that understanding will become, insight to you, become something that sticks with you, and you just know, this will not last, this changes. This will take place over time for most people. Most people are partially mindful and also partially deluded. So, it depends how much time and effort and interest you take with your practice. But I would encourage you to listen to the Dhamma and read and find out about the Dhamma first. That will help. And then start observing in your own life how these khandhas, how they behave, how they manifest in who you are, in your day. And observe, particularly from the place of impermanence, just how things change, rise and pass away all the time. I think that's a very good way into the understanding the khandhas better.
Sadhu Lumpu. Next question. Someone doesn't enjoy sitting meditation, but he enjoys working meditation, such as working in the forest very much, and he has good moral conduct. Can he progress just by doing working meditation?
Ultimately, you could say it's possible. If you're really mindful, you can work. I hope we're not mistaking working for walking, but it looks like working. You spelled it working 3 times there, so sounds like working. But yeah, working meditation, you can practice mindfulness, of course. Mindfulness of your posture and your body as you're working. Mindfulness of the feelings arising and ceasing as you're working. Mindfulness directed to your mental state, the thoughts, the mental states you're experiencing, and mindfulness of the Dhamma, how suffering arises, how to abandon suffering, the 4 Noble Truths. You can do all of that while you're working. And, some parts of life, even for a meditative monk living very simple ascetic life, they'll still do some work in the sense they may have to wash some robes or sweep some leaves or do maybe simple tasks, but still you would call that work. So everyone will have to do work at some point, and the aim is to always maintain the mindfulness directed to whatever you're doing, whatever's going on, whatever's coming up into your experience. So if you find, what many people do is they find the movement, the activity brings with it a certain interest for them. It's interesting to do a job of work. Sometimes it's satisfying. Fine, you start there and you try and practice mindfulness directed to these different aspects of your body and mind as you're doing the work. And like you say, you try to do it in a moral way, so you may also be directing mindfulness to contemplate and be aware of precepts as you're working. If you work in the forest, there'll almost certainly be a few challenges. The number one, you dig the ground, you may find an earthworm, and you don't want to kill this earthworm, or there'll be things coming up, or the very least mental states. You may have thoughts coming up. Some of them are unwholesome. You're annoyed, you're worried, you have desires come up, and that's also somewhere you can contemplate whether you're meditating or whether you're working. The idea, sometimes meditation is useful, even though people find it challenging, is you're really working with your mind in a more intense way, and you learn a lot quite quickly through meditation, usually speaking. Then you can take what you've learned and apply it when you're doing more ordinary activities like working. So I wouldn't completely shun the sitting or walking meditation, but maybe just do a little bit here and there where you can, where you feel you can. But then what you learn from it, take it and apply it as you do your work. And you make your work, the activity, the object of your meditation, in the sense, if you're, I don't know what work you do, but if you're gardening, say, you're pruning plants, digging holes, sweeping, doing this, doing that, that's where you focus your mind, getting that job done well with mindfulness. There's a start, there's a finish, contemplating impermanence, contemplating the states of mind that arise as you're doing that job. Are they wholesome or unwholesome? If they're unwholesome, try to abandon them. Try to bring up the wholesome states of mind. Everything you learn in meditation, formal meditation, you can apply to a job of work as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Luang Por, is it true that the last thought determines your rebirth? If so, given that I am still new to the practice, I'm worried about a bad rebirth, which itself is unwholesome. What would be your advice to me in view of the fact that I can die anytime? Thank you, Luang Por.
Well, it may sound a bit corny, but in Australia we have this phrase, no worries. When people are just saying, no worries, don't worry about it, that's all right, it's okay. So my answer would be no worries. You don't want to die with the worry, maybe my last thought is a bad thought. That's only going to make it worse, isn't it? Perhaps you need to just bring things right back down to the present moment. Don't concern yourself too much about the moment of death or when you're going to die, because you don't know. Focus more on the present moment and developing this ability to know your own mind in the present moment. Is your mind, whatever's coming up, what I tend to do a lot of is, establishing mindfulness and just observing how impermanent the states of mind that I experience, and the feelings in the body, feelings in the mind, the emotions in the mind, how impermanent they are. They come and go. And this kind of loosens up the obsession, the attachments we have for different emotional states, trains of thought. So if you're doing that regularly, Well, you can hope that when you get to the end of your life, your last moment, you can still be doing it if you're conscious. Just observing the arising and passing away of the breath or the thoughts coming up in your mind. That's one way you could prepare for death. Or another one is just focus on wholesome, skillful thoughts, skillful thinking of, think of different aspects of generosity that you've practiced, thoughts of kindness, compassion. You know, there's a range of things we can train in to develop the mind, to bring the mind to be used to or comfortable with just thinking wholesome thoughts. So at least if you are facing the end of your life, you don't know when it will come, you can turn your mind to do that because you've done it before. So there are two suggestions. Either develop a meditation object, a way of meditation that you're familiar with, that you can turn to any time, including as you're dying, or just developing directing your mind to think of wholesome, skillful things. But do it until you're familiar with that, you get used to that, and then that will stop your mind going into worry or fear or anxiety and so on.
Saralumpu. Are there any more questions?
Okay, looks like we've come to the end for this evening's session. So wish you all well in your Dhamma practice, and we'll see you again next time.